When the American Civil War ended in 1865, approximately 180,000 black soldiers had fought for the Union Army. They represented roughly 10% of all Union forces, yet their contributions, their sacrifice, their bravery, their strategic victories have been largely erased from mainstream American history. These men weren't just soldiers. They were freedom fighters. They were freedom seekers. And the system worked tirelessly to erase them. The 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, formed in 1863, was the first officially recognized black regiment in the Union Army. These soldiers were primarily recruited from free black communities in the North, from Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New York, and other northern states. Many were literate. Many were educated. Many had trades and professions. Yet they volunteered to fight for a nation that didn't recognize them as fully human. Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, a white abolitionist, led the regiment. Within its ranks were soldiers whose courage would leave a lasting mark on history. Sergeant William Carney carried the American flag through battle, ensuring it never touched the ground, earning him the Medal of Honor, though recognition came 37 years later, in 1900. Corporal James Henry Gooding was a journalist and soldier who spoke out against unequal pay and treatment. Lieutenant Peter Vogelsang survived the war and became a voice for black veterans. On July 18, 1863, the 54th Massachusetts launched an assault on Fort Wagner in Charleston, South Carolina. This was one of the most heavily fortified Confederate positions on the coast. The regiment charged directly into gunfire. They made it to the top of the fort. Hand-to-hand combat ensued. They fought with extraordinary bravery against impossible odds. The result was 272 men killed, wounded, or missing out of 600 soldiers, a casualty rate of 45%. The recognition came virtually none in mainstream history. The battle proved that black soldiers could fight with courage and discipline. It shattered the racist narrative that black men were incapable of being soldiers. Yet despite this heroic sacrifice, the battle remains largely unknown outside of military history circles. Black soldiers initially received $7 per month, while white soldiers received $13 per month for the same work, the same risk, the same sacrifice. The 54th Massachusetts refused to accept this injustice. They marched without pay for 18 months, going hungry, going without supplies, rather than accept unequal compensation. Sergeant James Henry Gooding wrote directly to President Lincoln demanding equal pay. It took until 1864 for the pay to be equalized, 1 year into the war. Think about that. These men fought for their freedom and the nation's freedom while being paid less than white soldiers. Some died, never receiving equal pay. The United States Colored Troops, USCT, was the formal designation for black soldiers in the Union Army. Between 1863 to 1865, the USCT grew to include 108 regiments of infantry, 12 regiments of heavy artillery, 7 cavalry regiments, and 1 engineer regiment. These weren't just northern free black men. They included escaped enslaved people from the South who joined the Union Army, free black men from border states, contraband, formerly enslaved people who fled to Union lines, and Caribbean immigrants. While fighting for the Union, black soldiers faced systematic oppression. They served in segregated units, separate regiments, and separate companies. They were commanded by white officers, usually, and quartered separately. Black regiments were given the most dangerous tasks: assaults on fortified positions, frontal charges, and were often used as expendable troops. Casualty rates among USCT units were disproportionately high. When black soldiers were captured, many were executed on the spot rather than taken as prisoners of war. The Fort Pillow Massacre in April 1864 saw Confederate forces kill 262 soldiers, most of them black, in what many historians consider a war crime. Black soldiers faced the constant threat of being enslaved again if captured. Medical care was inferior. Food rations were lower, equipment was often substandard or damaged, and they received less training initially. Before the official formation of the USCT, nearly 1,000 free black men from New Orleans, organized as the Native Guards, fought at the Battle of New Orleans in November 1862. They were some of the first black combat troops officially fighting for the Union. Their contribution was largely written out of history. Black soldiers fought in hand-to-hand combat at the Battle of Milliken's Bend in June 1863 against Confederate cavalry. Though technically a Union withdrawal, historians note the black soldiers' fierce fighting prevented a Confederate victory and held their ground until reinforcements arrived. The historical narrative barely mentions this. Black soldiers of the USCT charged into the crater at Petersburg, Virginia in July 1864. Despite suffering massive casualties and being poorly supported by white units, they demonstrated extraordinary bravery. Hundreds were killed and wounded, yet recognition remained minimal. 2 regiments of black soldiers, the 1st and 3rd Louisiana Native Guards, charged fortified Confederate positions at Port Hudson in May 1863. They made multiple assaults despite heavy fire. Confederate General Frank Gardner was reportedly stunned by their bravery, later stating they fought with the desperation of men fighting for their freedom. Yet their sacrifice is rarely remembered. 37,638 black soldiers died during the Civil War, killed in action, died from disease, or died from wounds. 2,751 black soldiers were killed in combat. Black soldiers had mortality rates from disease 2 to 3 times higher than white soldiers due to inferior medical care, inferior quarters, and deliberate neglect. Approximately 10% of all Union casualties were black soldiers, yet they represented only about 10% of the Army. Many black soldiers were buried in unmarked graves or mass graves. Their identities were never recorded. Their families never knew where they fell. Unlike white soldiers, many black soldiers have no grave markers, no recognition, no record of their sacrifice. After the Civil War ended, black Union soldiers were rapidly discharged. By 1866, most were gone from the Army. They were denied proper pensions in many cases, excluded from veteran benefits, targeted by violence from white Southerners who resented their freedom and their military service, denied employment because of their race, and prevented from voting in many states despite their sacrifice. In textbooks and historical narratives, black soldiers are often mentioned only in passing, if at all. The 54th Massachusetts gets brief mention for Fort Wagner, but the context of their struggle is stripped away. Their individual names and stories are lost. Their contributions are minimized or attributed to white generals and white soldiers. Photographs and historical records were often destroyed or hidden. The story that gets told is about white generals and white soldiers. The men who actually charged the forts, often forgotten. Black Union soldiers proved their humanity in the face of a system designed to deny it. They changed military strategy by demonstrating effective fighting capability. They won battles that turned the tide of the war. They fought for freedom, not just for the nation, but for themselves and their families. They broke the color barrier decades before the military was officially desegregated. These 180,000 men left behind wives who became widows, children who lost fathers, communities that lost leaders, and dreams that went unfulfilled. Many never saw freedom. They died fighting for it. The soldiers we should remember include Sergeant William Carney, Corporal James Henry Gooding, Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, white commander who died with his men, and Lieutenant Peter Vogelsang from the 54th Massachusetts. Other USCT heroes include Corporal Thomas Hawkins, Medal of Honor recipient, Indian Wars veteran, Sergeant Major Christian Fleetwood, Medal of Honor recipient, 4th USCT, First Sergeant Powhatan Beatty, Medal of Honor recipient, 5th USCT, and Sergeant Major James Freeman, educator and soldier. The Civil War ended 161 years ago, yet the contributions of black Union soldiers remain marginalized minimized and forgotten in popular history. Textbooks dedicate chapters to Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant, but Sergeant William Carney, his story is a footnote if mentioned at all. 180,000 soldiers fought, 37,638 died, and we've forgotten their names. This is not just a historical oversight. It's an ongoing erasure of Black contributions to American freedom itself. The next time someone tells you about the Civil War, ask them, what do you know about Black Union soldiers? Most people won't have an answer. That needs to change. This is Black Antiquity. Please like and subscribe as we share the stories of Black legends they try to erase.